I have something important to talk about. Listen to me. What? You did say you had things to talk about when you got home, right?
Yeah.
I want us to get divorced. What? Why all of a sudden? This is too sudden and unilateral, isn't it? While undergoing treatment for cervical cancer, my husband suddenly demanded a divorce. I was in a state of panic, unable to understand the reason for his sudden decision. Although he did explain the reason for the divorce, it was utterly unreasonable. I've found someone I love more than you. Please understand. It seems my husband intends to leave me for a 19-year-old woman. I don't mind getting divorced. However, divorce is not something that can be done as easily as saying goodbye in a relationship. I understand what you're thinking. But you can't just decide on divorce right now, can you? Let's discuss this further. What? Why? No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get divorced. It's not about that. If there's no love, we can't stay as a couple, can we? I won't do anything. My husband started to act recklessly, thinking he's some kind of hero for leaving to protect the woman he loves. His unreasonable demand for a divorce was frustrating enough. But his way of treating me as if I were a monster blocking his path to love was infuriating. I was on the verge of losing my patience if one more thing was said. You're at a higher risk of premature birth or miscarriage because of your cervical cancer surgery, right? That's practically the same as being infertile. A woman without fertility is worthless. I'll remarry a cute 19-year-old. My husband stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never have been said. I'll pack my things. I decided not to discuss any further and left the house. If my husband had been a bit more rational and tried to stop me, he wouldn't have ended up regretting it so much. 3 days after leaving the house, I was called by the hospital for a matter concerning my husband. Since our divorce wasn't finalized, I reluctantly went to the hospital. There, I found my husband sitting frozen in his chair, his face pale. Good, you came quickly. What? What happened? Is something wrong? Yes. Your husband, actually. My husband collapsed to his knees. It seemed like divine retribution had struck. I am Megan, a 27-year-old office worker. I married Kevin last year, and it's been almost a year since our wedding. Kevin works as a full-time employee at a supermarket, in charge of the produce section. We met 3 years ago at his workplace, but my first impression of him wasn't that great. What should I make for dinner tonight? It's a hassle. I'll just buy some cheap vegetables like usual and make a stir-fry. Tired from work, I decided on the dinner menu in my head. I knew exactly where everything was in the supermarket I frequented. So I headed straight for the stable and cheap vegetables like beans and carrots. On my way, I stopped when I noticed cabbages were on sale for 99 cents each. One head. I can't finish it alone. It's cheap, isn't it? The price will go back up to $1.58 tomorrow, so it's better to buy now. Cabbage has vitamin C, which is good for your skin. And it also contains vitamin K and calcium, good for your bones. No? Yes. I wasn't expecting to be approached by a staff member at the supermarket. And I was startled when Kevin suddenly spoke to me from behind. Without regard for my confusion, he continued to extol the virtues of cabbage as if he were a clothing store clerk. Baffled, I just nodded, put a cabbage in my basket, and left. After that day, Kevin would always recommend vegetables to me whenever he saw me in the store. Eventually, he started talking about his job and life. And then he started asking about mine, leading to him asking me out for a meal. Essentially, Kevin was hitting on me. The impression of Kevin hitting on a customer during work wasn't good. However, he kept inviting me out, so I thought, why not go out for a meal with him just once? I thought Kevin was frivolous for hitting on me. But when we went out to eat, he was surprisingly kind and sincere. My impression of him changed drastically. And I started to become interested in him, leading to us dating. After we started dating, I asked Kevin why he approached me in the first place. I saw you in the supermarket a few weeks after I started working there. And it was love at first sight. I decided that if I saw you again, I would definitely talk to you. I thought if I didn't do anything just because I was a staff member and you were a customer, I would regret it later. It turns out my husband wasn't frivolous, he was passionate about love. When he falls for someone, he becomes completely focused and loses sight of everything else. After dating for 2 years, we got married last year. Now, thinking about starting a family. That's when a major incident happened. One day, I was suffering in the bathroom. Initially, I thought it was my usual period, but the amount was abnormally high. There were also times when I bled outside of my period, and my urine started to mix with blood. You've been feeling unwell lately, haven't you? Are you okay? I think I'm okay, but maybe you're lacking iron. Should we try eating more spinach and prunes? Nutrition is important, but that's not it. Maybe I should get checked out at the hospital. It still hurts. After leaving the bathroom, my husband, looking worried, spoke to me. However, I soon felt abdominal pain again and had to return to the bathroom. This had been happening frequently lately. Feeling something was seriously wrong, I decided to get checked out at the hospital. Some people believe they could never be seriously ill. I was one of those people who believed they could never get seriously ill. Yet, surprisingly, it's often those very people who suddenly find themselves diagnosed with a major illness. I became one of those cases. You have cervical cancer. Me? But I'm still young. Cancer? Cervical cancer is a type of cancer that often affects younger individuals, starting in the late 20s. At 27, I never imagined I would be diagnosed with cancer. Hearing the doctor's words made me feel weak. And I could feel my back hunch over like an old woman's. However, the doctor offered some hopeful information. And by the time I left the examination room, my posture had straightened a bit. But the thought of having to tell my husband weighed heavily on me. And by the time I got home, I felt like an old woman again. On the night I learned about my cervical cancer, I was nervous about telling my husband as we ate dinner. My timing was off, and I couldn't taste the food, speaking less than usual. Sensing something was different, my husband put down his fork and knife and asked me, "You went to get your test results at the hospital today, didn't you? How did it go?" His question made my heart skip a beat. I put down my fork and knife and braced myself. I have cervical cancer. Cancer? But you're so young. They say cervical cancer can occur even in younger people. I don't know much about cancer, but can't they remove it with surgery? If they remove the uterus, doesn't that mean you can't have children anymore? Don't worry. It seems that's not the case. Surgery is necessary. But the disease hasn't progressed so far that they need to remove the entire uterus. So, even though it's cancer, treatment is possible, and so is pregnancy. Really? That's tough, but it's a relief that treatment and pregnancy are possible. Hearing my words, my husband seemed reassured and picked up his fork and knife again. Seeing his expression, I too felt relieved and continued explaining while holding my fork and knife. Cervical cancer forms around the entrance of the uterus, and the surgery involves using a laser to cut out a cone-shaped piece of that area. So, the shape of the uterus changes after the surgery. This change increases the risk of premature birth and miscarriage. But don't worry too much. Even though there's an increased risk, it's not like it becomes extremely high. Hey, we're eating right now. Can we not talk about surgeries and miscarriages during dinner? It makes it hard to eat. Oh, sorry. My husband stopped eating again at my explanation, which made me a bit too cheerful. I decided to continue eating silently, but the tension was gone from my expression. The following week, I was admitted to the hospital for surgery. It was supposed to take 2 or 3 weeks, but that was just an estimate. Depending on the situation, I could be discharged earlier, or it might take about a month. The thought of possibly spending a month in the hospital worried me about my husband's well-being. Make sure you eat properly. Don't fall into a bad diet. I always eat with balance in mind. You're the one who doesn't eat vegetables. And make sure you wake up on time for work, so you don't get late. I'm the one who wakes up earlier for work. You're the one who wouldn't wake up even if I tried. It seems my concerns were unfounded. My husband can manage on his own just fine. When my hospital stay began, I felt anxious about undergoing my first major surgery. And I couldn't sleep at all on the first night. Perhaps sensing my anxiety. My husband visited me the next day and avoided any talk of illness or surgery. This time of year, we get a lot of new student workers. A college guy started in the produce section. And 3 students joined the cashiers, or was one of them a freelancer? I don't remember since I don't go to the cashier section much. Maybe I'll check next time. Didn't you say the new workers usually quit soon? Hopefully, they stick around this time. That's the seafood section. It's tough work there, so it can't be helped. I never thought such mundane conversation could feel so precious. Talking with my husband made me feel like I was at home, bringing me a sense of normalcy. However, on the day of my surgery, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. The nurses tried to comfort me, but as the surgery time approached, their words started to blur due to my increasing nervousness and tension. As I was taken to the surgery room, I felt an urge to run away from the fear. But after entering the surgery room and some time had passed, I realized the surgery was over without me fully understanding it. It lasted about 6 hours, but all I have is a vague memory of it. Under general anesthesia, the surgery I feared so much was over before I knew it, leaving me feeling anticlimactic. Now that the surgery was over and I felt relieved, I was excited about sharing my first surgery experience with my husband. But on the day of the surgery and the following day, my husband didn't visit the hospital. There was no response to my messages. Why wasn't he even contacting me? 5 days after the surgery, just as I was starting to feel upset, my husband finally visited the hospital. How are you feeling? You seem a lot better than I thought. Do you know how many days it's been since the surgery? You haven't replied to any of my messages. Sorry about that. I'm alone at home now, so I have to handle work and everything at home. I planned to contact you, but I always ended up falling asleep. Well, it's okay. Recovery is going well, and it looks like I won't be in the hospital for a month. That's good to hear. Are you eating properly? After surgery, your body is weak. So it's good to eat soft, leafy vegetables like Napa cabbage and cabbage, which are rich in water. Make sure you eat those. I eat what the hospital serves, so there's not much I can do about it. I had planned to unleash all my frustrations on my husband, but his words reminded me of the inconvenience I was causing him, and I couldn't bring myself to be too harsh. While my husband is capable of living on his own, it doesn't mean he isn't burdened. This made me even more eager to be discharged as soon as possible. Yet, my husband stopped visiting me again after that. Despite my messages, he still didn't reply. I understood he was busy with work and home. But it had been over a week without any response from him. How are you feeling? Is discharge still a while off? Hold on. I understand that work is busy and managing things at home is tough. But isn't it too much to not hear from you for over a week? Well, it seems like I'm not feeling well. Where? You look perfectly fine to me. It's not like I'm feeling sick or anything. My husband began to fidget and hold his lower body as if he was trying to hold in the urge to go to the bathroom. He seemed uncomfortable, which made me curious about what he was referring to, so I asked directly. Why are you holding there? Did something happen? Well, it looks like I've developed some kind of rash. Is that because? I wondered if he had caught some disease, looking suspiciously at my husband. He seemed to instantly realize what I was thinking and started making excuses right away. Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like that. Guys can get rashes from sweat and humidity. I just didn't want to say it because it sounds unhygienic. Are you sure? You're not doing something you shouldn't, right? Of course not. I couldn't believe that he would cheat on me while I was in the hospital for surgery. So, I decided to trust what my husband said. I'll trust what you say, but you should see a doctor just to be safe. It's fine. It's just skin, right? If I improve my protein metabolism with vitamin B6, the rash will go away. I'll just eat some bananas and stay quiet. No, you need to see a doctor. No way. It's embarrassing to have someone look down there. My husband fidgeted again, holding his lower body as if the itch was unbearable. Although I think he should see a doctor, I don't understand much about men's issues. If my husband says it's fine, then it must be fine. Not wanting to talk about private issues in the hospital, I decided not to bring up the topic anymore. Another week passed. Again, there was no word from my husband. And the next time he came to the hospital was just before I was discharged. Hey, I've come to pick you up. Oh, are you the doctor? Thank you for taking care of my wife. As I was getting an explanation about future care from the doctor, my husband arrived. He hadn't been around to see how I was doing, so I thought it was a good opportunity for some payback. Doctor, listen to this. My husband has a rash down there. And I've been asking him to see a doctor, but he's too embarrassed to go. He thinks he can cure it by eating vegetables. Hey, let's not talk about that now. A rash? That does sound concerning. What does it look like? At first it was just like sweat rash. But recently it got worse, started to bump up, and looks a bit like cauliflower, should I say? You should get that checked immediately. See, the doctor says so. Let's get you checked out now. Today's the day my wife is being discharged. And we have a lot to talk about at home. I'll get it checked tomorrow or after. Make sure you do. It's important to get it looked at as soon as possible. With the doctor insisting, my husband had no choice but to agree to visit the hospital, despite how embarrassing he found it. I felt a bit embarrassed for bringing it up in front of the doctor, but my husband must have felt much worse. Serves him right. Feeling somewhat vindicated, I left the hospital with my husband. It had been about 3 weeks since I was admitted, but it felt like I hadn't been home in much longer. Excited to be back, I energetically flopped down onto the living room sofa, my usual spot. Instead of sitting next to me, my husband sat across from me, at the other side of the table. Megan, there's something important I need to tell you. Please listen. What? You did say we had things to talk about when I got home, right?
Yeah.
I want us to get divorced. What? Why all of a sudden? Despite having just finished surgery and facing ongoing treatment, my husband dropped a massive bombshell. I was stunned, unable to respond after hearing such unexpected words from him. My husband continued to explain to clear up my confusion. Remember I mentioned a new cashier started? I've fallen in love with her. It happened while you were in the hospital. So I decided to tell you once you were discharged. I thought it might affect your recovery if I told you earlier. This is too sudden and unilateral, isn't it? It's not like I did something wrong, right? No, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that I've found someone I love more than you. Please understand. Feeling dizzy with his words. I knew my husband was passionate and tended to be single-minded when in love. But I never expected this to apply even after marriage. This new cashier started around the time I was admitted, right? So, you were having an affair with her? That's why you didn't visit me in the hospital. Is your illness from that woman? Don't get it wrong. Yes, not visiting was because I fell for her. But we haven't started dating yet. We decided to wait until after I had broken up with you. So, there's been nothing physical. My husband looked at me with clear eyes. He wasn't lying, and his desire to pursue a relationship after ending ours seemed logical. However, it was overwhelmingly unfair. My husband might have romanticized his actions with passion. But essentially, he was just switching to someone he deemed better. What's her name, this person you like? Nicole. She's a student, right? How old is she? 19. Was she your type? I didn't fall for her because of her looks, but I think she has a cute face. It seems that's the case. Men's thoughts are simple. Younger and cuter is better. Looking at his passionate and straightforward nature from a distance. I wonder if it's always been this off-putting. I'm embarrassed by how happy I used to feel about my husband's passionate love. I'm fine with divorcing a husband who justifies his sleazy actions as a romantic runaway. However, divorce isn't as simple as saying goodbye, like in a romance. There's a lot that needs to be discussed. I understand your point. But you can't just decide on divorce right now, can you? Let's talk this through. What? Why? No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get divorced. It's not about that. Divorce isn't something you can just do easily, right? If there's no love, we can't stay as a couple, can we? You're not planning to do something to Nicole, are you? I won't do anything. Well, maybe she'll need to be involved in the discussion at some point. I see, you were gathering information like her name and age to harm her. His eyes are as clear as ever. He must think he's become some kind of hero protecting the one he loves. Already irritated by the unreasonable demand for a divorce. His way of treating me like a monster blocking his path to love was infuriating. I was sure that if he said one more irritating thing, I wouldn't be able to hold back. You're at a higher risk of premature birth or miscarriage because of your cervical cancer surgery, right? That's practically the same as being infertile. A woman without fertility is worthless. I'll remarry a cute 19-year-old. Nicole can have children without any problems. He stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never have been said. I'll pack my things. I decided not to discuss any further and left the house. If he had been a bit more rational and tried to stop me, he wouldn't have ended up regretting it so much. 3 days after leaving the house, the divorce was still in process. But preparations were steadily progressing. It seemed likely that the divorce would be finalized smoothly. That was the expectation, but a phone call from the hospital changed the situation. Expecting the call to be about my health, I answered. Only to be told that they needed to talk about my husband. and asked me to come to the hospital immediately. The hospital didn't know about our ongoing divorce. Perhaps they called my cell phone because I hadn't answered the home phone. Though I thought I might not need to go, since we were still technically married. I reluctantly decided to head to the hospital. Good, you came quickly. What? What happened? Is there something wrong? At the hospital, my husband sat frozen in his chair, his face pale. Having been in a similar situation myself, I had an idea of what this meant. It was likely a serious illness had been discovered. Does my husband have a serious illness? Yes. Your husband came in because of an abnormality in his lower body. And it turns out it looks like penile cancer. Cancer? I shifted my gaze from the doctor back to my husband. He seemed even more rigid than before, probably shocked to hear cancer mentioned again. Is penile cancer, like cervical cancer, more common in younger people? No, it's more common in men over 60. It's quite rare compared to other cancers. The odds are as low as winning $1 million in a casino. Getting it at a young age is like being struck by lightning in a city full of skyscrapers. Extremely unlikely. I see. Knowing my husband had drawn such an unlucky lot made me involuntarily smile. Even though I knew I shouldn't find the situation amusing. So rare to get such a cancer. What's the cause? It's hard to say definitively, but human papillomavirus is a common factor. That's the same as? Yes, it's the same virus that can cause cervical cancer. So, did I give my husband cancer? No, that's not necessarily the case. It can be transmitted through sexual contact, but men can also be carriers. So, it's possible that your husband transmitted it to you. Or both of you had it independently. Normally, the immune system handles it without issue, but sometimes it leads to cancer. Can my husband's cancer be treated? Yes, like your cervical cancer, it can be surgically removed. That means... I looked back at my husband, barely hiding my amusement. I managed to keep my laughter unnoticed earlier, but this time he caught me. What are you laughing at? Sorry. I couldn't help it. Doctor, when you say removal, does that mean all of it? Given its progression, partial removal is likely. What about having children? It won't affect the ability to have children. However, there might be some loss of reproductive function and changes in appearance. Though we'll try our best to minimize them. Doctor, just go ahead and remove it all. What the hell is wrong with you? Frustrated, my husband tried to stand up and confront me. But his legs gave out from shock, and he collapsed to his knees. Despite his anger, he continued shouting at me while looking up from the floor. The doctor, unaware of our impending divorce, seemed confused by our exchange. Holding my stomach and laughing. The doctor just watched silently as my husband raised his voice at me. He had intended to leave me for a young and cute 19-year-old. Probably looking forward to enjoying his time with her. But now, he faced trouble in the most crucial part due to his excitement. Moreover, just as he pointed out my increased risk of preterm birth and miscarriage from my cervical cancer surgery, he now faced a risk to his reproductive function as well. Doctor, we're getting divorced. So there's no need to contact me about my husband's illness anymore. Well then, see you again. Make sure to listen to the doctor and focus on your treatment. Satisfied with the amusing story I heard, I went home. I would be completely satisfied as long as the divorce could be finalized as soon as possible. However, there was a bit of trouble regarding the divorce after finding out my husband was ill. A week after learning about my husband's illness, my phone rang again. Thinking it was about the divorce, I answered, but the call was about something else. Please. Let's pretend we never talked about divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? We've come this far, why now? I told Nicole about my illness, and she broke up with me. Really? I couldn't help but smile again. Luckily, it was a phone call this time, so there was no worry of being scolded for my reaction. I had somewhat anticipated this outcome. My husband tends to go on a rampage when in love. And the love of a 19-year-old is often impulsive. The two of them must have meshed well together. However, after hearing about the illness from my husband, Nicole, much like when I freed myself from the illusion of my husband's love, regained her composure. It was easier for Nicole to leave him than it was for me, given her age and options. With this illness down there, nobody will marry me. We're not divorced yet. Can we start over and support each other since we both have the same concerns about having children? You just want any young and cute girl, right? Don't say things like that. Work is tough. Everyone at the store knows we're getting divorced and that I was dating Nicole. I can't face work if I'm dumped by both you and Nicole. It's too embarrassing. That's not my problem. Maybe you should change jobs. Don't call me about anything other than the divorce, okay? Wait. Don't be so cold. Think it over, please. Finding the conversation pointless, I hung up on my husband's pleading words. It was time to go shopping for dinner. I decided to go to a supermarket that wasn't where my husband worked. Eventually, our divorce was finalized. Nicole, who had dated my former husband, left him and also quit her job at the supermarket. It's unclear where she went, but she's probably living her normal life somewhere. As if nothing happened with my former husband. However, unlike a student, my former husband couldn't easily reset his environment. For now, he seems to continue working at the supermarket. But it seems Nicole shared everything with their colleagues. And my former husband is now working under awkward circumstances. Likely feeling quite uncomfortable. I assume he will change jobs eventually. Nicole and my former husband were just in a relationship. So a simple goodbye ended everything for them. But in my case, it was a divorce. A reason had to be provided to our families. I told my former husband's parents everything about why we were getting divorced. Naturally, they were furious. The news spread among relatives, and not just at his workplace. But he also feels out of place among our relatives. As a result, my former husband has become completely isolated. He will soon start treatment for his illness. It must be tough to fight the illness alone, but it's his own doing. So he has to manage by himself. Having completed my surgery and on the road to recovery, I've returned to work. I'm still 27, so I'm hopeful for a good relationship in the future. Until then, I'm determined to work hard.